Previously on WandaVision.
Snooper's gonna snoop.
Where are my children?
These are runes, Wanda. Only the witch that casts the runes can use her magic.
Vision was gone, but you wanted him back. He's all I have.
Well, that's just it, Wanda. He isn't yours. He's ours.
He was gonna burn Westview to the ground just to get what he wants. Don't let him make you the villain.
Maybe I already am.
This is chaos magic, Wanda. But that makes you the Scarlet Witch.
Wanda, the fuck is going on? Okay guys, so here we are back for another breakdown and review of the penultimate episode of WandaVision, titled Previously On. This episode was so good and gave us so much of a better insight into Wanda's origin, along with some very special reveals and revelations in the present day that had me freaking out. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with a quick point on the MCU intro, which for this episode turns from its classic red to purple, indicating a very Agatha Harkness driven episode, with her powers being the same colour. We start the episode off in Salem, Massachusetts in 1693, where Agatha is put on trial by her own mother and 7 other witches from her coven. This is likely a reference to the Salem 7 from the comics. Also from the comics, Harkness actually settled in the English colony of Salem, Massachusetts, where she formed her own coven of witches, hoping to freely practice magic in the New World. But in 1692, she and her group were persecuted by the Puritans during what became known as the Salem Witch Trials. The Salem Witch Trials of 1692 were actually a real-life event, and quite a dark time in American history. More than 200 people were accused of practicing witchcraft, and 20 were killed during the hysteria. Anyway, it turns out that Agatha is on trial for practicing dark magic, and as a punishment, the other witches start chanting some kind of incarnation in Latin, while performing magic that looks to be killing her, before she turns said magic back on them and, well, kills them. There are 3 things of note about Agatha's mum. 1, if you look at the credits, Agatha's mother is called Evanora, which is a clear reference to the Wicked Witch of the East in Wizard of Oz. 2, she's wearing the same pin that we always see Agatha wear. And 3, during her last effort to stop Agatha, we can see a magical energy crown start to form on her head, similar to that of Wanda's headdress. We then pick up with Wanda and Agatha, and Signor Scratchy, in Agatha's basement, directly after last week's episode. We see Agatha is desperate to know how Wanda is achieving all of this, and using a power that is beyond Agatha's capability despite hundreds of years of practice. We then see Agatha take a strand of Wanda's hair for DNA and use it to open a doorway to Wanda's past. Now this actually gives more credence to my theory about this basement dungeon thing being the Nexus, a reality between all realities from the comics. Nexus beings are rare individual entities with the ability to affect probability and thus the future, thereby altering the flow of the universal time stream. So, considering Wanda is a Nexus being, it makes sense that Agatha would use Wanda's DNA to control the Nexus and use it to get what she wants. This is also the same reason that the Time Variance Authority tends to keep an eye on Nexus beings, which makes me think that, Loki being in a different universe and Time Variance Authority having some sort of influence on that show, it makes me think that it's going to heavily link into WandaVision and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man 3. Anyway, the door opens up inside and we go back to the Maximoff family apartment in Sokovia, when Wanda was just a little girl. We see her parents, Oleg and Irina. We also see a young Pietro and obviously a young Wanda. We see that Oleg has brought home a bunch of American sitcoms for an English-speaking night for them both to learn the language and bond as a family. What's cool is that these sitcoms are the sitcoms that Wanda has based her WandaVision episodes off, like I Love Lucy, Bewitched, and The Dick Van Dyke Show, which turns out to be Wanda's favourite, as she watches with glee, and we notice obvious parallels between what she's watching and what we were watching when the first 2 episodes started streaming. This is a really heartwarming scene as we get to see Wanda and Pietro's childhood for the first time, and knowing what happens to the family, it's heartbreaking when we see them laugh and bond. Speaking of what happens to them, this actually turns out to be the night. The night where the bomb hits and their lives change forever. It's really quite shocking as the bomb just hits out of nowhere, as they tend to, and we then see that Stark Industries shell a few feet away from Wanda and Pietro as it beeps, just like the Stark Industries toaster ad from episode 1. But, as Pietro said in Age of Ultron, it doesn't go off. Well, we actually find out that this is because of Wanda using a probability hex, a power she has in the comics, and a confirmation that the Mind Stone didn't give her powers, it merely enhanced a lower form of powers that she had from birth. We then go forward a few years to see Wanda and Pietro's time in the Hydra Lab. Now sadly we don't see Aaron Taylor Johnson back, but we do see the moment that Wanda first comes into contact with the Mind Stone. Now this was a moment that we saw in the trailers that had us scratching our heads as to what kind of involvement that origin had, but now we know. This has got to be one of my favourite parts of an already incredible episode, filled with so many amazing moments. We then see the blue housing unit for the stone float away from Loki's scepter, and explode, revealing the Mind Stone which cast a blinding yellow light. At this point we then see a person's silhouette in Wanda's eyes. And who is it? Well, it's Wanda. We see a silhouette of Wanda in her iconic Scarlet Witch costume, headdress and all, as she floats in front of her own eyes. Now, it's unclear whether this is future Wanda or Wanda from another reality, maybe even the 616, but it's likely to be a vision from the future since if you enhance the shot, you can see that she's wearing her costume that's been teased in some of the WandaVision promotional material. We then see Hydra agents then try to play back the footage of the events. It cuts in a similar way to what Wanda was doing when she censored the footage in Westview, leaving out the part where she comes into contact with the stone, and simply shows her standing up and then on the floor. We then join Wanda in her cell as she is once again watching a sitcom, this time being the Brady Bunch. After Agatha decides that it's time to press on to the next chapter in Wanda's life, we then enter the Avengers compound post Age of Ultron, as we see Wanda in her room watching an episode of Malcolm in the Middle. An episode where Bryan Cranston's character has a roof collapse on him, which is a more literal representation of what Wanda's going through, and how the perfect world she made is literally falling apart. We then get a callback, or call forward? We get a call forward to Civil War where Wanda senses Vision's presence as he then enters through the wall. This then leads to a beautiful conversation between the two of them which explores Wanda's feelings about her brother dying and having to live without him in a totally new environment. To which Vision responds with a line that I know from the internet's response hit home with a lot of people watching.
But what is grief? If not love, persevering.
A beautiful line that not only hit Wanda and the people at home, but also seemed to have gotten to Agatha too. Now, we know that Marvel Studios doesn't tend to make villains bad for the sake of being bad, so perhaps there's some deeper reasoning behind why Agatha wants to know how Wanda has done all of this. Maybe she lost someone too. I mean, I know I'm prepared to die on the hill that Mephisto is Agatha's husband Ralph and is going to show up at some point as the evil mastermind behind all of this, but what if that's not the case? What if Ralph was genuinely her husband, who was either a sorcerer or just a regular dude who died, and all of this is just Agatha trying to get him back? Wanda tells her to stop and that all of this is too much, but Agatha pleads with her, begging her to press on, because they're on the precipice of finding out what she needs to know. So, at Sword HQ, now only a matter of weeks ago, we see Wanda ask to see the Vision's body. Wanda gets to Director Hayward's office and he refers to him as the Vision, rather than just Vision or Viz, which is actually pretty cool because this is his full name / title in the comics. We then see Hayward show Wanda Vision laid out on the tables being torn apart piece by piece. This is a nod to the Vision quest from the West Coast Avengers comics from way back when. Wanda then breaks the glass and floats down to see him. Now this is where we think we're going to see some brutality from Wanda as she steals Vision's body, but we don't. We actually see her go to his head and touch it, saying that she can't feel him, a callback to Infinity War where she says she can feel him, and also from the same movie when Vision tells her he just feels her, moments before his death. She then leaves peacefully without the body, which means that Hayward was obviously lying when he told Monica that she stole the body and reanimated it against his will, in an attempt to rile her up and further fuel the battle against Wanda. In fact, this whole thing was a setup anyway. Think about it. Hayward wants nothing more than to bring Vision back online, and he's spent years trying to do it in every way possible. And now he's choosing to tear him apart all of a sudden? No, I don't think so. If you pay close attention to him during the scene, he's watching Wanda with anticipation and saying things like,
Not everyone has the kind of power that could bring their soulmate back online. Forgive me. Back to life.
he wants her to bring Vision back to life. I mean, come on. The guy said himself, Vision is a $3 billion sentient weapon, and look at the way the Sword agents are pulling him apart like a Volkswagen Golf. $3 billion, people. Come on. He's clearly trying to get a reaction from her. After leaving the Sword facility, Wanda gets back in her car, and on the passenger seat is the deeds to a house that Vision bought for the two of them to, and I quote, grow old in. This is of course their house in Westview, which Wanda then drives to, and it's really strange actually to see the real Westview in modern day with all of the WandaVision characters as normal people. Anyway, she gets to the house and it's literally just a base of an unbuilt house, which then leads to such a powerful and emotional moment to an already really heart-wrenching episode. Wanda walks to the center of the land and breaks down, falling to her knees and letting out a huge burst of energy, similar to the moment when Pietro died in Age of Ultron. #never forget. The burst of energy then builds the house in jigsaw-looking pieces, which is very much evoking the art of Joe Quesada's House of M cover. This energy spreads all the way through Westview, transforming it into the black and white 1950s world of the first episode. Inside the house, Wanda's energy then creates a brand new Vision purely out of yellow energy, despite the rest of her magical energy around her being her classic red. This is an obvious reference to Vision's energy colour being yellow from the Mind Stone, but also suggests that there is something more to his creation. So, as if it wasn't already clear, the Vision inside the Hex is solely a creation of Wanda, and doesn't exist outside of the Hex in the real world. Well, Vision does, but just not this Vision, but we'll get to that later. Back in Westview in real time, we see Wanda standing in her living room, but this time, in the off-screen space we see studio lights and other components used to film a show. When outside of the house we hear Billy and Tommy calling for Wanda's help. As Wanda runs outside, we see that Agatha is now dressed in her full witch attire, and has the two kids by their necks on magical energy leashes. Agatha seems pissed off to know how much power Wanda naturally possesses, and that she uses it for pointless tasks like making breakfast for dinner. A callback to episode 1 where Wanda makes breakfast for their dinner with the Hearts. We then hear her call Wanda a title that she's known by in the comics but has never been known as in the MCU.
And that makes you the Scarlet Witch.
I was freaking out during this moment because this is the name that I've been waiting so long to hear her be called. And just when you think it's all over, we have another mid-credit scene just like we did last week. This time we have the coolest part of the entire episode as we see Director Hayward's Project Cataract come to life. Literally. We see that all these years of failing to bring Vision back to life has finally come to an end, as all he needed was a bit of Wanda's magic from the drone that they sent into Westview a few episodes ago. Vision is now officially alive again in the real world, but now he's White Vision. This is another moment from the old West Coast Avengers comics where Vision is brought back to life as White Vision, which for those of you who don't know is still Vision but without a lot of his personality and therefore his love for Wanda. Basically he's now just an android. Okay, so there we have it. I absolutely loved this episode and found it so interesting to fill in some of the gaps in Wanda's life, but equally so goddamn heart-wrenching. To think that while everyone is feeling so great to be back with their loved ones after Endgame, as we saw during Tony's funeral monologue, Wanda is dealing with all of this heartbreak since all of the people she loves are gone. I can't wait for next week's episode that will hopefully bring the series full circle but also lead into the future of the multiverse saga with Loki, Spider-Man No Way Home and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But I'm also not ready for what is sure to be a really emotional ending to a fantastic show. I've been Brandon, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, then maybe consider subscribing to catch our other content as and when it releases.